I would trust the average black person's character and integrity over most other people in this country.
Wow, please,
I absolutely would.
please.
I would, if I were going to choose a babysitter for my children, I would trust a black woman's character before I trust almost anybody.
The whole world would. Welcome to Not All Hood. I am excited to have back on our show the esteemed Dr. Daniel Black, professor of African American Studies at Clark Atlanta University. Now, he is one of my favorite people. I consider him a mentor, a colleague, and a comrade. One of his missions in life, which I absolutely love, is inspiring young black minds to believe in themselves. He is a nationally renowned award-winning novelist. The Coming, Perfect Peace, They Tell Me of Home, and Black on Black are just a few on his must-read catalog. Today we have a really insightful discussion on family dynamics, child-rearing, black integrity, and dignity versus identity politics. Enjoy the conversation. Yo, so I want to just go in on a controversial subject, but I want to pose a question to the table. How many here were, and it's called corporal punishment, but how many of us were spanked? Got whoopings, basically. Ooh. Yeah. Oh,
I did. I certainly did.
he's like, let me pull on up.
Yeah. I don't think I knew any black kids who didn't. I didn't.
I caught a couple.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, listen, it's part of what has been passed down to us. However, my parents didn't catch it. Oh, thank you. It's part of what's passed down to us, but my parents didn't catch it. It was more of maybe it was 3 girls, right? Because there's a dynamic when there's young men in the family as opposed to girls. My dad was outnumbered, so there were 4 girls, right, with my mom.
Sure.
Right.
So all of that, I think it probably changed just both of my parents' perspectives on a lot of things. And as girls, you know, there wasn't a lot that we got into that would get us in trouble. If there was anybody that was going to be the one to get in trouble, it would be me. And I got the talking to, I got the negotiate. I mean, I can say it now. It's not like we were negotiating when I was 7, but when I look back, there was a lot of talk, and so there was understanding, and there was a level of accountability through that I still had, and I still was afraid of not pleasing them, and that came just through talk. It didn't come through a switch. Though I remember once my mom said, "Go get a switch," because that's what they told her.
Right.
But
Did you go get it?
yeah, that switch just sat on the table. Nothing happened with it, but it was, it was the process of it. My aunts used to say, "Oh yeah, your dad used to spank you. He used to, and then you girls would run under the table, and then he'd just be like, it's okay." Right, so there was no spanking in it. It was hard for him to do that.
Hard for him not to spank?
Hard for him to spank.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
it just was never. It was never a point of discussion or interruption or anything that I remember in that way. No.
And you, sir?
You are looking at me like I am a unicorn.
No, I'm not. Only because my daughter's 7, and we've never hit her at all. We've never spanked her. And I don't even know, like, if I really think about it, I don't even know if there's anything she's done that would really warrant that. But there have been times where I would kind of make like a half joke, like, "Boy, one of these days, she's gonna catch one of these days." And I would say it was kind of like a half joke. And then one day my wife said, "Try it. Go ahead, do it. Next time you feel it, do it. See how you feel."
Hurt you more than it would hurt her, I bet.
When she said, "See how you feel," it stopped me. Like, it stopped me from even making the joke, right? And I talk, I would talk about how, like, my dad would call me, I was an obedient child. And for me, what kept me on the straight and narrow was I was afraid of getting whippings, right? I had my share of them, but I was afraid of that. So it was the fear of that kept me in line, so to speak. And my mother would talk about how her mother had a way of just talking to her that kept her in line. And my mother's mother passed when my mom was 13. So life was different for her after that.
Right.
But prior to that, all of her remembrance of her mother was just her mother being able to talk to her in a way that really made her understand the situation, if you will.
Yeah.
So that's what we do with our daughter. But when I would talk about how that worked for me, like getting whippings worked for me, and my wife would say, well, stop saying it worked for you. Like, that's not, she always felt that it worked for me was like the wrong term of recollection of that. Yeah. So I think about, so when I look at you and you talk about not, ever being spanked, I think about my daughter and I go, oh, wow, okay, you are a great result and fruition of a different way of disciplining. But it makes me think about, because it's been such a part of our culture. A couple of months ago, my mom and I sat down and had a conversation, and she said, at one point, she said, the way I raised you the way I knew how. I disciplined you the way I knew how.
Sure.
I disciplined you in a way that, she said earlier she didn't have the words for it, but she recognizes it now as plantation parenting. And it was just a really interesting conversation because we have had, for a while, we had differences on the way I raised my daughter versus the way she raised me. Mm-hmm. And I think at one point I made a comment about, I'm raising my daughter differently from how I was raised. And she took that as a rejection of her parenthood.
Or correction.
Her parenting. Or correction. Yeah. And I was trying to explain, like, no,
it's just different times, different
lives,
places.
Yeah, it's different times. Our lives are different. She had me when she was 20 and was a single parent. I was like, I had my daughter, I was, 46, married. So just just inherently our way of raising our daughter is going to be different. And that just kind of comes up. So I always think about now, where parents are in terms of, I wouldn't say corporal punishment, but that just sounds so technical. Getting whippings.
Yeah.
Like, what's your way of disciplining?
We do a lot of talking. Yeah. Every now and then. So I used to do this thing. I'd be like, stop. Like, little finger thump, just like little tap on her hand.
Your daughter?
Yes. And Shelly was like, yo, stop that. I was like, it's a little thump. Like, it's just a reminder. She's like, no, that's aggression. It's an assault on her body. I was like, oh,
they coming
shit.
for me.
No, like it hit me hard.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes like what was the process of, like, it made sense to you immediately when she said it?
Yeah. And I kind of like, it still, things would happen and I'd be like, like I'd have to refrain myself from doing it again because it was just a natural thing that I caught, got from my parents and my grandparents, just, just act right. Like they used to do you in church, lean over, pop,
I think there is a historical precedent here. And I think, well, of course, there is no monolithic answer, right?
Right.
There's no one way that all black people discipline their children. We know that, certainly. But I've wondered, and I certainly have no empirical data for this, but I've wondered the extent to which not whipping, especially now, is also a class stratification, right? Like, were your parents college-educated people?
Yes.
Right? And yours?
Sure.
Yeah.
Later down the line.
Yeah. I think there's something about the acquisition of knowledge, and I think there's something about the ways in which middle-class black folks saw themselves ascending in terms of class stratification that gave us permission not to have to beat our offspring. Right? I think that beatings came very much along with servility, with bondage, with poverty, right? Because the truth of the matter is, I think this whole practice...
Can you unpack that again?
Yeah, I think there's a way that that beating black children, of course, came along with slavery, right? But I think slavery comes along with poverty, right? With a person's absolute belief that they have no real access to the goods and the resources around them, and so you've got to force children to behave a certain kind of way, right? Because really, metaphorically, and in some ways, literally, black people have been the children of America,
Absolutely.
and America beat us,
Right.
right? So we were all whipped, right, by our parents, but it was America, so to speak. And the question ultimately became, how do you please America?
And that's episode.
Right.
We're 5 minutes in. Oh my god! Oh my gosh! Wow!
Yeah, and it's true. I mean, and this is how we get respectability politics. How do you please America?
Wow.
Right? You don't leave here and show your behind. We've all heard these phrases.
Right.
In other words, when you go into America, right, you got to present your best self. You got to, because we're trying to convince someone that our humanity has value.
Right. And that we're
Right.
okay to go out into the world to just mix with you.
Absolutely. But the reason we're willing to beat you is because the price we've paid to do this convincing, you don't have the right to fuck that up. So you got to uphold this tradition we have, right? Because in a minute, America's going to be convinced.
Or
Okay.
or is it the concept of, well, I'm going to beat you and discipline you and show you how to act so America doesn't have to.
Yes,
You
which
know.
I think is kind of the same thing, though, because like I'm willing to beat you, right? Because what I know in America is that beating produces obedience.
Okay, so let me make you obedient so America doesn't.
That's
have to.
right.
Sure. Okay.
That's right.
Gotcha.
And that's how you got a slave to obey you. You beat them.
Gotcha.
Right? And beating is far less complicated than
Man, tell me about it.
they're trying to figure out how to discipline you, right?
Yeah.
And
Word.
you know, discipline and teaching character is time consuming,
Yes.
right? But again, that's why I'm beginning to think it's a class association because you have to have the time to do it.
Right. Yeah. And I can think of ways that makes perfect sense. Now I know that there are going to be a lot of people in the comment section that are going to have their own empirical evidence. So we're just talking right here, and I will say that there were other tools that clearly my parents gave me and my sisters. I have two sisters to say, no, we're okay here. We're not going to discipline you. You don't need to be beat because I'm going to give you the tools to go out into the world and you're going to be okay. You're going to go out and get an education. Lots of it.
Yes, but see, again, here comes the class and the education
Right,
thing all over
right,
again.
exactly.
And you mentioned something earlier that I think is true, and that is, I think that we are more prone to believe that a black boy is beatable and needs it. Actually needs it. That masculinity is recalcitrant by definition,
Right.
right? Masculinity is disobedient. So you have to constrain masculinity, and you have to do it fiercely, and you got to do it early, right? Femininity we think of as being obedient and submissive by design, right? We don't think of masculinity that way, and so a boy has to be reeled in. And he's got to be reeled in intensely. He's got to be, reeled in quickly. Which is why we tell boys never to hit girls. But we don't tell boys not to hit boys.
Right. Right. And then, a lot of it comes from fear, right? Because you're afraid of what might happen to your son or daughter, if that's where when they get out into the world. It's like when you see a child rush out into the street and then you're so scared as a parent, you grab them and you're so mad.
You're angry,
and then
right?
you're angry,
Right.
but it's fear. And that's why they get a spanking. Because I used to see that happen. I said, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it makes sense now because you're so fearful of what could have happened that I need to, in this moment, teach you a lesson so it will stay. But it's all based on fear.
But I have to admit, I don't think my parents ever feared that I was going to get hit by a car when they whipped me.
Well, I'm saying if they put oh, I see what you're saying.
What you're saying is perfectly valid, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. I also think that there was a time, probably up until I might guess, maybe the 80s, the 90s. I think there was a time where we believed that whipping a child actually made them excellent. Right. I remember my parents would quote that verse, spare the rods for the child.
Yeah.
Right. Which means if you don't beat them,
Yeah.
right, you're going to have hell to pay. Right.
Which I think is something that I think that's the thing that I had been struggling with up until my wife said that to me. It's like, okay, well, is she gonna grow up spoiled because I didn't discipline her in the way that again worked for me? And I think it was that fear because of that verse. Like, well, knowing that there are other tools, but like, do those tools really work? And like you said, having the luxury. Like I remember a couple of years ago, my daughter had cousins over, and I was trying to get her to do something, and she said something to me that, I was like stuck in a moment, like, okay, what do I do in this moment, right? And my mother-in-law and my wife's aunt, like, they're looking at me like,
What you gonna do?
Right, and it was that moment, and like my heart started beating fast, and I was like, okay, I know there are other tools. I don't have them right now, so what do I do? And my wife, went to my daughter, and my daughter went to go play. She said, no, you're going to come with me. And they went to the bathroom. And the bathroom was right next to my office.
Right.
And I just had to go to my office and just like listen to hear, like, okay, what's the other way of going about this?
Right.
And I listened to my wife talk to her, and it took like probably about 10 minutes just to calm her down, right? Because she wants to go play, and so she's like, ah. So it took my wife about 10 minutes to calm her down, and then she talked to her. She never raised her voice, but in total, it took about 30 minutes. And I'm listening on the other side of the door, going, "My goodness, I would not have that kind of patience." So I admired my wife, for her patience, but I also understood that she had the luxury of 30 minutes to use other tools to get her to understand what was going on.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will say this though. I've taught at Clark now for going on 31 years, and I will say, I get black kids from every place black people exist, and these 18-year-olds who come are magnificent and brilliant. They are absolutely wonderful. But the discipline and character is poor to me. It is poor to me. Whatever new thing we're doing, I'm not sure it's doing what we're thinking it's doing in terms of black parenting.
And what's that new thing?
Right? This notion of, I'm not going to touch my child. I don't want my child, right? I'm going to talk instead of the punishment, right? Whatever we're thinking we're doing in terms of discipline, I'm not sure that it's doing what we're thinking it's doing. Because first of all, I'm not sure we're doing discipline. I'm not sure. I think we're doing correction, but I'm not sure we're doing discipline, right? Because I'm not sure we can discern between discipline and punishment. And it's like, I don't want to punish my child. What it seems to me, and I'm just guessing.
Break that down.
Punishing and whipping your child are two different things.
It can be. I agree. I agree.
Right.
So
I agree.
yeah. So I'm looking at.
I agree.
Yeah. So at least for me, and I'm hearing from Candace's experience. It's not discipline. It's not just talking and not disciplining and not punishment. There are consequences that come with.
Right.
Sure. But see, it sounds like to me everything we're talking about is something corrective. I'm not sure discipline, by definition, is a corrective. I think discipline is on the offense. I don't know that I think discipline is a defensive measure. In other words, I think the way you teach a child discipline is that you teach them consistency. Right? That has nothing to do with what you did wrong. That's a correction, it seems to me. Discipline is, I want you to know order. Right? I want you to make choices because you know what it means. Like when you get up in the morning, you make up your bed. The minute you open your eyes, you turn around and make up this bed. That has nothing to do with anything you did wrong. I'm teaching you discipline.
And a value system.
Right.
Sounds
Absolutely.
like.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely. This is not because
And expectations.
you were talking to me out the side of your mouth. Right. This has nothing to do. Discipline, I'm really teaching you how to have an ordered, structured life. I think that's discipline. That's discipline. The notion of how do I correct you when you fall short, or how do I correct you when you think you've gotten beyond yourself, right? I'm not sure that's really a question of discipline as much as that's an issue of correction, which I think is important.
Right.
Yes.
But the reason I brought up young people today is because I meet a lot of young people who are unclear that even correction ought to happen, right? Like, Dr. Black, I don't have my paper. Okay, well, what should we do? I don't know. How do you have no idea? What do you mean you don't know?
Right.
Like, Should I should give you an F?
Right. What's the solution
And
that
they're
you
in
have?
college. You're talking
and that's
college.
the
Absolutely.
discipline.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the order.
Yeah.
Right.
See, that's exactly
that
what
you
right.
shouldn't be stuck at something so actually relatively simple.
Absolutely.
When you know the expectations
And in fact, I
that
want to
you're
tell you,
supposed to
I don't have my
Right.
paper
It's
in.
in the syllabus.
Dr. Black, I don't have my paper, and I'm clear that I'm going to get an F for this assignment. I can roll with that student all day.
Right.
All day long. We're good.
Right.
We're good. We're good. Sit down. We're good. This notion of, I don't know what's going to happen. I guess that's up to you. Right. That's no discipline whatsoever.
Right.
Because now I have to figure out, right, what's the consequence for your behavior. That's your job.
Because you have no structure in your life.
Interesting.
Right. You have no
Right.
sense of, right.
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 Or if you're used to being disciplined, then this is a
You're
situation
used to
where
it.
they're expecting you to do the correct thing.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's
Right.
Yeah.
that's exactly right.
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 And that does have a lot to do with values.
It does. It does. It does. It does. And there are also ways it seems, and I've done this too as a young parent. I think in many instances we're trying our best not to wound our children the way we felt like we might have been wounded, or the way because it seems like a lot of our correction is trying to make sure that this fragile thing is never hurt. Like it can never, like, I don't ever want this child to be
Discomforted.
bruised, or I don't ever. It's like trying to figure out how I want to correct you. I'm clear I should do that, but I've got to do so in such a way where you have no scar from this, right? But it's so much, right, that it's like the child is like, Mama, they not gonna do nothing.
Right. You're not even a threat.
It's just, I mean, come on. I mean, yeah. I mean, they gonna talk, and I'll just sit here until they get done, Because even something as simple as,
I don't know those kids. Like, even growing up, I didn't know those kids.
even something as simple as we're talking, and a child comes in and says, starts begin and close your mouth. Adults are talking.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Right. I believe in that. But many parents wouldn't say it that way. They say, sweetie, honey, right, would you mind going over and sitting down and being still, right, while we're finishing this? We placate in some instances. We placate sometimes, trying to keep seemingly this fragile child protected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but there's also, we're talking, teaching our daughter to say, excuse me. Right? And we're talking, and then sometimes she'll say, excuse me, and we're still talking. And she's like, excuse me. Then there's the lesson of, okay, just because you say excuse me doesn't mean that we have to stop talking. We heard you.
Right.
1 second. Let mommy and papa finish talking. But we heard you. So I think there's also that, because I was raised, little kids should be seen and not heard. Right. Like you said, adults are talking, be quiet. So I think there's also a space where you where parents have to acknowledge and respect the kid as a human being, but there's also boundaries isn't the word.
It's tricky,
but
because admittedly, I'm old school in this.
Sure,
I'm a
get
little
that.
old
Oh, yeah,
school.
get that.
Right,
Get
admittedly,
that.
I want to
Get
make sure I
that.
say
Yeah.
I'm old school, because I think even to say a child, say excuse me. No, you say excuse me if there's an emergency.
But here's my pushback, because if in the real world when you're talking, so
we're talking to a child, of course.
Yes, but children interact in the world the way they interact at home. So as adults, we don't say excuse me to other adults if there's an emergency. It's like you guys are talking, and actually what we do as adults, if you guys are talking, I might not say excuse me, right? I might try to just chime in on the conversation, right?
And sometimes,
or it's the excuse me. You know, that is chiming in.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
breaking
but
it up.
sometimes as adults we're rude too.
Yeah.
So in the real world, if I want my daughter to know, excuse me, so just for me, I don't think she should be excluded from saying excuse me because she wants to have something because she has something to say. Either it's part of our conversation or it's something she wants to, she needs attention from one of us because of whatever. So I don't necessarily see excuse me as a bad thing.
Okay.
As opposed to no, you wait till we're done talking.
See, I'm gonna push back just a little.
Yeah.
Which is the fun of this, of course.
Yeah. That's why you're right.
See, the fact that your daughter is 7,
Yeah.
right, I think makes all the difference in terms of this. And I think we've got to give clarity that there are certain parameters we're talking about child rearing because the person is a child. As the person becomes an adult, those parameters shift. And those parameters change. Because I absolutely believe that if you and I talking, I think your daughter, as brilliant as she is, I think she should know, mommy and Dr. Black, daddy and Dr. Black are talking, so I'm gonna wait. Now, again, if there's something and I think that's honorable. I think that's absolutely honorable. If there's something she desperately needs, I think she absolutely should say, excuse me. I think
That's the emergency.
Absolutely.
I see.
I think, but if there's some 7 and 8-year-olds talking, go over there and insert yourself. And I think the reason I think that's important is because there is something about a child learning, right, the notions of boundaries and how you play.
Yes.
Right. I think that's very, 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 very important because if a child is not careful, and if we're not careful, we'll teach a child to play with an adult the same way they play with a child.
If those boundaries aren't there.
That's right. And I think that's tricky, and I think that's dangerous. And I think back in the day, I definitely think that's what our parents were doing. Like, when you leave here, you don't insert yourself in the grown folks' conversation because people are offended, right? Who are you? Blah blah blah. I get that. And where I do agree with you, I think some of that was the extreme, right? I get that. I think some of it was survival too, right? But what I still think is that there's a way in which a child is supposed to learn how to negotiate him or herself with the clarity of who I'm talking to, right? And I think that matters.
Interesting.
I just believe that matters. Even this, as a college professor, I think an 18-year-old child coming to college should know there's a certain disposition, there's a certain order, there's a certain language you do not use if you're talking to me.
It should be that way.
Any idea of what students will say to me.
And email you.
But the reason I'm not angry is because what I realize is this is the boundary they came from home with.
Right.
Right.
I had a student once say to me, I said something to another student that they thought was going to be offensive to me. I didn't even hear it. And they said, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, Professor Kelly, did you hear that? And I said, no, I didn't. And they said, oh, we didn't want to hurt your feelings. I said, oh, you actually can't hurt my feelings. That's not the dynamic that we have. Because I'm the professor, you're the student. So that any growth that you're doing, I'm a part of that process, but you can't hurt my feelings. You don't have that power. That's the boundaries, those are the boundaries that we have. So I understand what you're saying in that you hope that they come to you with a certain decorum, but they just don't because some of them have never even been in. First of all, some of them, it's the first time that they are the first person to even go to college. So it's a whole different dynamic.
But they went to church. They went to somewhere, and I'm right. And I'm saying that to say
where there was order.
Absolutely. But I don't want to swing the other extreme, right? What I'm simply saying is I do think there's a balance to be found in this, and I do think that there's something about a child knowing how to, what folks used to say, how to mind, how to carry yourself, how to talk if you're talking to a grown person. Even for me, I would prefer students to answer when I ask a question, yes, sir. I would prefer that. Yeah is problematic to me. That's problematic to me. But some of what I really am trying to teach them is that there's dignity at home too. Right? Because I don't want you to say yes, sir, to the man down the street. Right? But you wouldn't say it to me.
Yeah.
Right, which is some of what we were teaching at one point. You know, we could go all the way back to the plantation. Yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Right.
But
Code
then,
switching.
yeah, right. But the point is now you don't have to switch the code. I want to decide that you have the same kind of integrity and the same kind of character, so that you get my highest honor, right? And all this comes full circle because, of course, we're talking about child rearing, and what I'm really talking about also is at 18, I'm getting the result of it, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere in this. Kids are friendly, right? But the character edges are really, really rough. The character edges can be very, very, very rough. But I understand because there are ways in which we're not nearly as rigid in terms of insisting on a child's character. Now we're hoping for it.
I think that many parents will send their children to college to get in front of a professor like you to kind of smooth out those edges. In other words,
and that's a problem.
That is a problem. But I've also heard that hopefully, Jerome will go to school same way they send
I've heard that a million times.
Same way they send people
That's right.
to the military.
That's
exactly.
right.
To the
That's
military,
right.
they
That's
come
right.
back a different person.
Yes.
I'm hoping that happens.
Right. The part
Yeah.
we're leaving out is what are you hoping they'll do that you weren't willing?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Well, they might say, "Well, I didn't have the time." They would say,
Well, I don't have it either.
But you have our check and it cleared, and I'm in your class.
But surely your child is more important than the check.
No, but I paid my tuition so that he could get that fine tuning from you.
Yes, and what I'm saying is, you mean to tell me your love for your child does not exceed the check? In terms of you're thinking this check pays me, right, to transform your child's character, but your love and adoration for the child wasn't enough for you to take the risk to do it?
Listen, Dr. Black, in this day and age, I think that
I'm actually agreeing with you.
Yeah, yes.
There have been tons of parents who told me, listen, I'm dropping my child off. Dr. Black, work him out.
right, work him out. See you graduation.
Oh,
yeah.
I mean, there's something you want me to do.
Yeah.
Right? That you don't want to pay the emotional and psychological price for what it's going to take to pull this off. You thinking I can do it because I'm not as emotionally connected to them as you are.
Right.
Right.
Or that you couldn't, because if they're 18,
Right.
then there was all this time before then that clearly they couldn't
or didn't.
And there's also the dynamic of them, the absence of the soft skills, right?
Yeah.
That due to COVID and whatever,
And
the
where's
digital
somebody's
age,
phone?
you know what I
Exactly,
mean?
that phone.
That have changed the dynamics in terms of how they communicate, who they communicate with. They might not even be used to communicating with elders, right? Because some of their teachers are closer to peers than elders.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that dynamic in there makes a big difference too. Right?
I mean, I don't believe that a professor should be called by their first. Obviously, I know you would not be called by your first name, but there's some professors that have that dynamic. That can't happen.
I don't even
That
call him
can-
by his first name.
But so
That cannot happen. Right,
to a high
y'all
school
have known each other.
Right.
There
And I
is
tell them all the
no
time,
way.
baby, call me. Right.
I went to a high school where I called my teachers by their first name, right?
And now, where did that directive come from? The students were like, "Oh, we like you. Can we call you Josh?" Or he introduced or she introduced themselves to you? Call me by
Introduced.
my first name.
Yeah.
By
I've
first
heard
name.
many-
It was sort of the standard.
And at white
of
schools,
course.
it's very standard.
And it was a Quaker school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I went to a
So-
white graduate school, and all of the professors say, "Call me Charles. Call me Mary."
Right.
I was like, "No, ma'am."
Like even I ended up calling when I pretended like I was in college a couple times. You know, I'm still like Mr. and Mrs. You know, so and so.
Right.
Like even when they were calling me by the first time, yes, Miss Rosemary. You know,
Wow.
just because that's how I grew up. I mean, just it's a sign of respect for their position as
Absolutely.
educators, you know,
Absolutely.
as scholars. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the question is like, what does that breed, right? Like, what good is it, right? And I think we need a little more research. There are lots of books on Black family instruction, right? But I think we need more books on Black styles of parenting and what's the fruit of it, right? So that if a child says yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, like what difference does it make, right? I think we need to study. Yeah,
Like,
Yeah.
the other piece of that is I also became the rebel child that I am too. You know, So the yin and the yang, you know.
Which means what? You're the rebel child, and so that because you were a rebel, your parents had to adjust with the way that they disciplined you.
No, they didn't need to discipline me. I was a good kid. In my
But
head.
you were a rebel child.
I mean, I just so one of our family dynamics is that things were just non-traditional, right? Like I was in the house where my mother didn't cook, you know. So my dad was the cook in the house, which is, you know, sort of the non-traditional just patriarchal, you know, outside, you know, sort of norm. We like to get Chinese food for Thanksgiving. Not really, but for Christmas.
Because nobody cooked.
Because not because nobody cooked, but because it was easier, and we wanted our time together instead of somebody being in the kitchen, you know, doing what they were doing. We wanted to be together.
And that's why you don't know dressing from stuffing.
You didn't catch me.
We have
But listen.
figured this out.
You didn't catch me. You missed the first joke. I said it was for
Of course.
Christmas. I tried to pop it.
Right.
But the rebel, but back to the rebel, being the rebel child.
I hooked myself up. Damn.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did. Yes, you did.
What about it? What? I mean, it was good living for me.
Wow.
Oh, you got the question?
Yeah.
Like, you know,
you know, this
I didn't. I was talked to about the things I did wrong. I didn't get a lot of beatings. It happened occasionally. Usually, it was when I endangered myself and endangered others.
Where you be in trouble? Yeah.
Like it was. I knew it was from a space of love and concern for me, not them being angry at me. I told y'all the incident where, you know, in retrospect, my dad was just scaring me. You know, caught me at the door. I did something and walked in to my bedroom. He shook me. He just threw me, and I was like, I bounced on the bed. Boing. And he caught me midair. And just looked at me like, don't do that again. Like, you know, get your shit together. I don't know what I never did again.
Yeah, right.
But,
Never,
you know.
Right.
But you mentioned the food at Thanksgiving or Christmas, and I know for me, in terms of a value system, being in that kitchen and being aligned and seeing that order that we had during not just the holiday season, but I'll just use that as an example, and going to the store and getting the greens and carrying on the tradition and learning the recipe and then writing down all the ingredients to make sure that I understood it. I mean, all of that was really special and kind of really got me grounded. And then there was order. That was part of a value system. You're making me laugh. That was, I don't know why. That was part of a value system that you found just right there inside of the kitchen. Now, as I was going through it and, you know, cutting potatoes and chopping up celery and learning the recipes that my mom's mom and my dad's dad taught her. I know that caramel cake down south, right? You know, that you really have to be very good at making. All that was a real sense of pride that came just from, you know, cake and flour in a bowl.
Sure. But I think some of that's gender-centered, too. I think there's a way girls are invited into that kitchen tradition differently than boys are. I think what you're saying is 1,000,000,000% correct. Right, but a boy who would do that, right, is going to pay a different kind of price.
Wow.
Right, who is going to be in the kitchen writing down the recipes.
Agreed.
Right? You know, but there are traditions, of course, for boys to have too. Right. The thing I think that's tricky here is, like, I had a student who was ill one day and he was going to miss class, and he sent me a text and said, "Dear Dr. Black, I'm sick AF." Delete.
Did you even address it?
Delete.
No.
Delete. Who the hell are you talking about?
Not him.
You don't send that to me.
No. And what I normally do is when they send a message like that, I wait to see them in person.
And I did that too.
And especially when they're combative, right? Or what I call thumb thugging. Write this
Right.
You know, anyway. So, and then I wait, never reply. Number one, just like you, and then I wait to see them in person. An interesting thing always happens. They are never that person on email that they are in person, because a lot of them don't have the social skills. And that also comes from parenting and what goes on in the household.
Right.
That if your kid came out of the womb talking about today, texting today I was born, that's a problem. But that's really how they've been brought up on social media, and it's changed the whole dynamic
Sure.
of how they even just physically interact with each other.
Sure.
I put students in group situations and they have to find their partner, and they'll come to me after class and they'll say, I can't find her. I can't find,
Sure.
Jacqueline.
Sure.
And I was like, Jacqueline's right behind you.
Right.
But they don't have the wherewithal to say, hey, Jacqueline. They are always coming to me for those types of solutions because they don't have the ability to interact and end up writing an email just like that.
And see, what I'm saying exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it a little differently.
Yeah.
I think it's a lack of home training.
So how do you respond? So I was clear you went delete, but when you saw
When he came to class,
what
when he came to class, I said, hey, brother, I remember this so well. I said, do you know the email you sent me? He said, yeah, I was telling you I'm not going to be in class. I said, you can't put AF in an email to me. But what was really magnificent, he said, oh my God, Dr. Black, did I offend you? And what hit me, nobody's
didn't
ever
know.
taught. But see, I'm putting the two things together.
Yeah.
Somewhere that parenting was off. Because he was supposed to know you don't say AF to a professor. But if you can say AF to mama, you can.
Right.
Yes, you can.
And
Somewhere
it-
he has said AF to adults, and it was fine.
Right.
Right. I'm the one who seemingly objected.
Right.
Right. But this has happened a gazillion times in so many ways. And students are always like shocked, like, oh my God, Dr. Black, forgive me. And I'm saying, you really didn't know.
Because it's supposed to be a compliment to you.
No.
Because they embrace you like you're a peer.
Yeah.
You
Students
know?
have told me,
But-
Dr. Black, I fucks with you.
Right.
With me?
Like
With
that?
me?
With those words?
But what's so brilliant, and the reason I use this is because every time students have said it, they're horrified, right? They're absolutely horrified that they offended me. Like, oh, no, I was really saying that you my boy. This is my favorite class. Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I said, brother, I knew what you were saying.
Just don't say it to me.
Right. The issue is somewhere socioculturally, right, this nomenclature has never been dismantled as problematic. Somewhere this kept getting passed as all right. But see, what I'm saying is somewhere we're going back to the parent. Somewhere a parent is supposed to say, listen, when you're talking to me, this is the language that's appropriate. When you're talking to your little friend next door, you might can say, right. When I call you, don't just come. Come immediately. Come immediately. That translates into when I want my paper, I want it Friday. Well, Monday, I mean, Dr. Black, I just hadn't had it finished. Then you have an F. But see, if I can make up my bed whenever I get ready, I can hand in this paper whenever. See,
Because there is no order.
Absolutely.
Discipline,
And a 7, a
expectations,
9-year-old
and boundaries.
child, right? If you can eat, you can wash that dish.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
You send a dish in the sink for a maid? Who lives here?
Went to
I'm sure.
better watch that
Pull
dish.
up a chair. Watch this dish.
Right. If you can't reach, put a step stool or something.
and watch this dish.
Oh, we had chores.
You know, they make little brooms.
They do.
Right.
They do.
They
They
really-
do.
Yeah.
And here's why.
Yeah.
This is to fit your hand.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. But I'm saying there's a way that those lessons translate. That's the point they translate into something.
Did you have chores growing
Oh,
up?
good Lord Almighty.
I like.
No, work, like literal, like. In fact, I'm gonna tell you something that most people do not believe. I was a grown man at Clark College before I ever slept past 7 a.m. I never one time slept, because the way I grew up, the house wakes up.
Right.
So when the parents, you get up too. Everybody gets up. The house wakes up. If breakfast is at 7:30, it's at 7:30. You missed it. You're hungry. You don't cook when you get up. Mm-hmm. We gonna make something again for you at 10. The devil is a liar. You're going to be at this table at 7 o'clock.
What were y'all's chores?
Sure, man.
I'm a little old school. You have to forgive me.
No.
Chores, what? Dishes, trash, mow the lawn.
We had to feed the cows, cut wood. And, oh, absolutely.
So I had to. They
I grew up
had me cutting wood or breaking the wood for a little while, but then I was like, man, my back is sore. And the dude that unloaded the wood for us, he was like, boy, you ain't old enough. All you got is a long gristle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that matters. That matters.
Yeah.
That matters. And you know, when I grew up, girls at 9 are ironing the clothes for the house. Because the boys are outside doing such and such and such. Right. But what it does is it breeds this notion of you owe for this breath you breathe in. Mm-hmm. Right. So you have to do something in exchange for this. Not you're so marvelous, right, that you really get things because you're just magnificent and you're sweet and you're beautiful.
Right. It's transactional.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my mom was like, I mean, I did trash, dishes. And my mother was like, I'm on Cosby. Like, I'm on the #1 show in the fucking world.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my mother was like, I don't care who pays the bills. I'm still the mama. So I wash dishes. So the first time I was able to find a place that had a dishwasher, we had a place with a dishwasher. Yeah. I still loaded the dishes. But all of those chores, like that stuff did not change. And my mother was very clear that nothing changes around here.
I love that.
And that obviously that has served me.
Absolutely.
And again, that kind of order.
Absolutely.
I mean, you look at my journey and my path and where I am, like that kind of order.
Right. And that answers your question then when we circle full back. And that is, your daughter has got to wash those same dishes.
Right.
If we're gonna get the fruit out of her that we get out of this.
So I tell my daughter,
I'm gonna put this part on loop.
So Winter washes dishes, right? Loads the dishwasher.
And Winter is 9.
She's 9, right? And I tell her the story about I was probably 14 and I didn't wash the dishes one time and came home and the dishes were in my bed. Winter's like, I wash the dishes.
Absolutely.
Dishes were in my bed. Had to not just take them upstairs and wash them and load the dishwasher again, but not my bed. I had to change my bed,
Right.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
You never did that again, huh?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah.
My parents wouldn't buy a dishwasher because they said we have 6 of them.
And I don't necessarily believe in like using the dishwasher. I'm like, yo, just wash the dishes.
They literally refused. But as soon as we left, when I went to college, they
started using
they all of a sudden, and dishwasher, automatic pea sheller. I was like, what the hell was that?
Yeah, I spent my summers in Chicago, right, with my dad and my granddad and his wife and my brother. And my grandfather, it's the dead heat of the summer, like on Saturday mornings, because my grandfather worked all week. Saturday mornings, he'd get up like 6:30.
Absolutely.
Mowing the lawn.
Absolutely.
And he would not get a bag for the lawnmower.
Nope, that was your job.
That me and my brother had to, like, every Saturday, it was our job to rake these leaves, rake this grass.
Absolutely.
And we're like, why won't he just get a...
Yeah. Because convenience doesn't necessarily breed excellence.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Oh, yeah.
1,000%. And as a result, like, I'm up at, like, even now, I'm up at 5:30, 6:30, trying to be productive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again,
absolutely.
just that order, that...
Oh, yeah. It matters.
Yeah.
It absolutely matters. It absolutely matters.
But the trickle-down effect of just the history of Black people in America, for some people, they just can't overcome it. I mean... Overcome the effects of... Well, you name it. Anything
All the
from
isms.
Reconstruction to the Jim Crow era to Black codes. to what happened, you know, and all the wars and how that affected us, and the war on poverty, then the war on crime, then the war on drugs, then the, you know, the Moynihan report and what black families were doing, and you know, drugs itself and the way that it hit the black community, HIV and AIDS. I mean, all of those things, just in terms of the structure of the mass incarceration, the laws, the policies, everything that has happened to us historically, we still see the vestiges of. So that when I see somebody, I always have some grace. I do, because I know that not everybody has those same tools. The migration, right? Trying to find something better. It's just all of those major things that happen to the black family to try to do better in life. Not everybody has it down pat, and I do give grace for that and understand it and see that. See that.
Sure. But even in the midst of that, I would, in general, and I'm making a generalization here, but in general, I would trust the average black person's character and integrity over most other people in this country.
Wow, please.
Absolutely would.
Please.
I would, if I were going to choose a babysitter for my children, I would trust a black woman's character before I trust almost anybody.
The whole world would.
Right, but there's a reason. That's right.
Right, historically.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for us to put the flesh on those bones. Like, why? Why? Right. Also, there was a time, if you were talking about servanthood, if you were talking about work ethic, etc., you wouldn't be the black man.
Right.
Right. Because black people believed in integrity, even in bondage. We believed in character, even when we were being beaten. And there's a million examples of that. Because when we were freed from plantation existence, we didn't start telling kids, cuss them crackers out. No. You had to respect white people too. There was a time when black people taught black children, you say yes ma'am to that white man too. Just like you said to your grandmother. Because character, you can't compromise it just because the circumstances are adverse.
And in the midst of the most dehumanizing times, we came through.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is why black people always believed that we were going to win in the end, because ultimately character is going to override the excellence of anything.
Yeah.
I mean, here we are in 1955, the Montgomery bus boycott, right? Folks are walking miles and miles and miles and miles to work, right? And part of the standard in Montgomery is school starts at 8 o'clock. Now, you may have to start walking at 5. Depending on where you live in the city. But you can't be late.
Can't be late.
It has been, I'm sorry, there's no bus, no problem. Start walking earlier.
Right.
The standard at this school is that we start at 8 o'clock and have your lesson with you. Black people believed in character at whatever cost. At whatever cost. And this is important in terms of black families, because even when we start talking about something like the black family and Juneteenth and all this, when slavery ended, the main thing black people did, though most people don't talk about, there's a book by Heather Williams called Help Me to Find My People. The main thing black people did was to scour, especially the South, trying to find family members who were sold away to put back together now.
Through the Freedmen's Bureau too, right?
Sometimes, absolutely.
Sometimes
that's
through the
right,
Freedmen's Bureau.
absolutely. And many of them literally walked from Louisiana to South Carolina to Georgia, trying to find a son who was sold from me 38 years ago. Right? Have you seen a boy who might look like this now, et cetera? And the reason I think that's so beautiful and so amazing is because black people, in their own efforts and limitations, did the work of literally putting black families back together again. Right? That is a magnificent, magnificent testimony of a people. Instead of just being mad about it, they said, I'm going to go find my son.
Right.
And in this book by Heather Williams, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of accounts, even of black people putting ads in newspapers.
That's right.
Right. Have you seen this child? They had a mark on the side of her head. Right. She was 16, ready. She'd be 48 now. You know, whatever, right? And the beauty of that is that's really why black people started doing this thing called family reunions, right? This is why generally white people don't have them.
That's right.
Because their families were not dispersed.
Right.
the Black Family Reunion is Black people realigning, right, what enslavement dispersed in terms of the Black family.
Yes.
And we're still doing it now.
Still doing that. August Wilson, Joe Turner's Come and
Joe
Gone.
Turner's Come and
That's
Gone.
right. That's exactly what that's about.
Absolutely.
What's the name of Heather Williams' book again?
Help Me Find My People. Heather Williams. Yeah. And this is how you get this whole tradition of Black family reunions. Because the whole point of the family reunion is to amass as many of us as we can, and then we're going to see if we can find these other branches.
Yes.
Right, we're gonna see if we can connect this person with this. Right, oh my God, you came out of California. You heard about who else is out there? Right, it's a magnificent story, and that's really the Juneteenth story. That's really it's not barbecuing.
Right.
I mean, it really insults Black people to think slavery ended one day and the next day, right, we partying. That's really insulting if you really think about the beauty and integrity. Right, what I'm doing the next day is I'm looking for that child you took from me.
Yeah.
In fact,
or my husband.
You can't barbecue good if your daughter ain't here. Can't be no party yet. You know, that's extremely important. But what I'm really talking about is how the Black family at one time was the keeper of Black character and integrity. If you're gonna go to church, right, you wear this. Some of it went too far, which ended up being, respectability politics. But what Black folks were trying to do was trying to instill this notion that you live by a standard. In everything you do, everywhere you go, you live by a standard, right? Because a standard really shows how much higher you are than a beast. And I just think that was
Which is why we still got married and jumped the broom. We created different standards, even though we didn't have all those rituals, all those traditions. Still went to church.
Absolutely.
There were times when the master would allow enslaved people to have a Sunday to themselves. They would get dressed up. They would make sure that at least as many traditions as possible were kept in place. That's why I find the Gullah Islands so amazing and spectacular, that so much of that is intact, that you can look at the way that people in the Gullah Islands actually weave a basket, and a picture of that basket, if you put that basket next to a basket to someone who's weaved the same basket in Ghana, it's the same pattern. It's the exact same intricate
And that's
pattern.
possible because for the most part in the Gullah Sea Islands, the slave master didn't live next to those who were enslaved. The enslaved folks lived there primarily by themselves. This is true in the Caribbean also, which is why very often in Gullah culture and Caribbean culture, the African retentions are clearer. See, it's only really in Southern Black America where the slave captor and the enslaved lived alongside one another. In these other places, they owned the plantations, but they went home for the most part during the year. They would come check on the property once or twice, which means all the other times we get to be ourselves.
Right.
Right, and that's really important. And also, I think it's important for us to understand that slavery did not destroy the Black family. Slavery just disrupted it. Right, because I think that would give slavery entirely too much power. Right, it disrupted the Black family. That is absolutely true. Right, but our ability, and we did all kinds of creative things, right, to keep Black families together. Like all of us who are no biological kin, but we're on the same plantation. We might all take the name Johnson of the person who owns this plantation, so that in the years to come, anybody who was on the Johnson plantation, right, we would be able to find one another.
Right.
Yeah.
None of us are sons of John, though, or some of us might be, right? But it's more likely that I could find a person if you had the name Johnson because they're keeping records on the Johnson.
So it's strategic in order
That's right,
to keep
but
the
they're not
family
keeping
together.
records on the property.
Correct.
But if I'm on the Johnson plantation, I could find you because there's a record of Johnson and all his property. Genius.
It is. Yeah, as you said, we came through all those trials and tribulations to still come out, as you said, to a point where you're going to take a Black woman over anybody to watch your child. There's this, Philadelphia has a Black Museum of Joy. And on their website, it says that the act of joy, because of what we've all been through, is really an act of revolution.
Sure.
Because it is almost impossible that we were supposed to actually make it this far, but we did, and that's the character that I see you talking about.
Sure.
Everything in spite of.
Sure. And the truth of the matter is, it was only seemingly special that we made it this far to folks who did not understand who we are. Right? Anybody who understood who we are would understand and be very, very clear that, of course, we made it this far. This is what we do.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a shock and no surprise.
Right.
It's a shock and a surprise to folks in America who did not understand the resilience in black blood. So, oh my God, y'all made it. This is what we do. How would you know? Do you know the Middle Passage should have done it?
Right.
That didn't kill us? Plantation life should have done it. That didn't kill us? See, we're going to keep going.
Right.
How many did they hose down in the civil rights movement? How many did they hose down? And those people's children still went to college.
Right.
In other words, if you're going to destroy black people, you're doing the wrong thing.
Right. You won't win that.
You're not.
Right. It's not a good bet.
Because our survival is in front of your intention.
Boom.
Our survival is in front of your intention.
Yes. In other words, if you're trying to, by the time you scheme our destruction, our survival has already been schemed.
Right. We've already started creating like
It's already happened.
new traditions, new things that are gonna help feed our survival.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the canning tradition. You don't can food because you're hungry.
Right.
You can food because you dream you might be. But right now I'm full.
Right. Right. Preparation.
So what about like the new traditions? And I guess they aren't. I don't know if they're not necessarily black traditions of like not being married and just social partnerships and long-term partnerships in terms of how that affect on the family structure and things of that nature, right? Because we see
a
that
lot of
happen,
that.
you know.
Yeah, we do. Yeah,
know?
yeah. You know, and it's relative. Historically speaking, it's a relatively new thing.
Right.
Right. Because even and there are books about this too. Even if you talk, late 19th century, even after slavery, et cetera, in the 1920s, 1930s, probably 75-80% of all black kids grew up in the house with their biological mother and father.
Right.
Both of them.
And now we're up to about what they say 67% born into single families, single parent families.
Yeah.
But is that stat like, taken from when you say single parent family, that means it's just the child and one of the parents, or is it that
We were
they
talking
aren't
about this
married,
early. Right.
right? And
But both of them might be in the house.
right,
That statistic is one primary parent in the household.
and then you also like for me, I'm thinking like, okay, is that because of the when they want like food stamps and all that stuff,
Welfare.
welfare
Oh, right.
dynamic, you know what I mean? They're
The
not
man cannot
reporting, certain things. So
Right. It is that kind of what helps to spur
those
numbers.
those numbers
Because
to be so high.
Regardless,
Perhaps.
it's a high number.
it's a high number. Yeah.
Even if you took that out of the
it's a high
equation.
number.
Yeah. I'm curious because we were talking earlier
Yeah.
about the notion that a single mother cannot raise a black boy to be a man.
I have my own positions on this.
Yeah.
Can she raise a woman to be can she raise a girl to be a daughter? In other words, are we saying are we asking, can she raise a boy to be a man? I'm asking, can she raise a girl to be a woman?
Sure.
Right. And is that only because she's a woman?
I think that's the
Logic.
that's the philosophy. That's the-
And I think that logic is flawed. Because the implication there is the only reason we're saying she can raise a girl to be a woman is because she's a woman. We're not saying anything about her excellence. We're just saying something about her gender. Just the fact that she's a woman means the girl will end up being a woman. That's because the girl is already female.
Right.
Right.
We're not saying anything about the black woman's excellence. And I find that insulting to black women. Right? In other words, can she raise a child? Can a man raise a daughter
yeah.
to be a woman? You have a daughter.
Yeah.
If something happened to your wife, should you give your daughter to a woman?
No.
Why not?
Because I can still raise her.
Right. So then why are we asking if a black woman can do it to a man?
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you do your daughter's hair?
Not yet. I wash it.
Okay. And can you
I
braid?
wash it. I cannot braid.
But you can learn to.
Yeah.
Yes. So then a woman could learn the things a boy needs.
Yeah.
Because right now you got a daughter and you don't braid no hair, but she's growing fine. But in a minute, if you needed to, you'd go to plaiting.
Yeah.
And I think you're an incredible father. Even she gets 10, 11, 12, and her period comes. Do most men know what to do?
The men I know.
I think most men would find a woman,
Agreed.
right? Which I think is insulting.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
I think that's insulting. Because I think most mothers, when their son needs a haircut, she knows where the barbershop is. And she takes him. Most women don't say, I got to find a man.
Right.
My boy's head is not. Women don't do that.
Yeah.
Women don't do that. We don't. In other words, I'm afraid what we're doing is this notion of kind of mimesis. In other words, I'm afraid what we're doing is saying a child can only be, right, the thing they see in front of them. So we're saying, well, a boy can't be a man because ain't no man in the house. Not only do I think that's problematic, that also speaks the notion that there's no imagination. Right? And in many instances, all of us, none of us are the thing we saw in the house. We're the thing we imagined.
Wow. Sure. The thing in the house helped influence.
Sure.
But we aren't the thing.
Right. Which then means the influence can come from anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. If somebody's going to take you to church, it can be anybody. It can be anybody. I even often think about the way people laud Jesus, but Jesus came from a single household. Yes?
Yes.
Absolutely. But then you end up saving the whole world. Guess Mary did all right. I mean,
Yes, Mary did all right.
I can't wait for social media.
No, you might not don't cut this
off of that.
Right. But you mentioned church. And a lot of people aren't mentioning church. Or if they're mentioning church, they are mentioning church in a different context, or they're not mentioning it at all.
You're absolutely right.
And
you're absolutely right. Because I'm mentioning it as a social institution, right, that lent its strength and its cultural power to black households like black single women, right, who helped sharpen what might have been otherwise dull edges.
Right. It's different today.
It is. And part of the reason it's different is because we're not taking kids to church anymore.
That's true. But a lot of those dynamics, well, I always try to figure out, where does that come from? Where was there a breakdown? I know we can't point to just one thing.
Right.
And I also think the church then and the church now are two different beasts, right?
Completely. Yeah.
And the reason I think they might be a little different is because of the social context in which we are.
Right.
So that the 1960s, not the whole pie, but the slice of it, the 1960s, the church definitely was different because we were looking to the church for different things.
Right. Sure.
And perhaps a slight more was at stake.
Sure.
Yeah. Right. I twist my head there too.
Because the 1960s church was different from the 1920s church.
That's
the
true.
1920s church was different from the hush harbors on the planet.
Right.
It goes on and on and on. If I had a biological child now who's 2 or 3, I'm not sure I would even allow that child to miss church, ever. But not that has anything to do with the Bible or Jesus. It's the notion of experiencing black ritual.
Yes.
And I think a black child needs black ritual. Song, to see how does song align with dance? How does dance align with word, rhythmic speech, etc.? How do you
Rhythm.
How do you do order in terms of process of things? Even the notion there's a devotion, there's a prayer,
Then
there's
there's
an
a
offering,
hymnal,
there's a
the
hymn.
hall-
That's
then
right.
it's called to
that's
the
right. That's
altar.
right. That's right.
Right.
I think a black child. That is your ritualistic inheritance. A black child is supposed to know that order, because what that also does is when you get in trouble, you know where to go. Right? What happens when you are in a tight spot at 3 o'clock in the morning and you done messed up and you don't know what? A child is supposed to have some internal reservoir of knowing how to pull up something, right? that gets you to a place of survival until the sun rises.
Yeah.
What about those?
So I'm sorry. So that being, are you talking about a physical church if they need to go
I think
someplace
so.
with the
I think so because I think so because things like even learning the church hymns, right? Those hymns do a work that has nothing to do with the religion, nothing to do with the religion whatsoever. How do you pray? How do you learn to pray? And most people say you just talk. Well, that's not quite how we do it as black people, right? And to hear other people do it, right, absolutely teaches you nuances of the way that particular aspect of ritual happens, right? Those things, I think, we have absolutely positively underestimated the value of those things.
So okay, so if it's not just talking to the higher power or whatever that whatever that higher power is, if it's not just talking, then what is it that the child is missing?
I think a child learns the nuances of the ways in which historically black people understand there's process in terms of how you go to God and how you do this God thing, right?
So
and I think there's value in that.
So this is what and this is one of the things that I find so freaking amazing about you. You know, and every time I talk about your book, Black on Black, I always talk about the chapter on the Black church.
The Black church, yeah.
And you know, I have more of a spiritual walk than a religious walk. And
me too.
And which is what I find so amazing because of just experiences that I've had with church itself keeps me from enjoying church.
I understand that.
And I know, so I find what's so amazing is because you're so open about your experience with the church, with Black church in particular, but you still have such a beautiful connection with the church and with God in that way.
Because it's not with Christianity. It's with African ritual.
And tradition.
Right. And we're doing ritual in church, but most churches don't know it. But it's just like I believe in schools. I fundamentally believe in the process of a school. I think a child does better in a school than being homeschooled. If a child, because I think the notion of learning while you're hearing other people learn, while you're hearing other people's ideas, juxtaposing this idea to my idea is different than when I'm at home and only my idea reigns. And my idea then becomes the central idea, and it becomes obviously the right one because ain't nobody here but me, right? The notion of you having to hear other ideas and the way those ideas make you rethink your idea, I think is an absolutely invaluable part of the learning process.
And you think that doesn't happen, or rather I should say, that also happens in social situations as well.
Absolutely.
But it's different in social situations than in the academic space.
And
but
there's
the principles, but the principles would be the same.
I think
no?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think the same principles. Yeah. But and the reason I think church is so important is because again, there's a way I can know God, but then when I see how she knows God, that gives me another notion of God. But if I don't never see that, I'm thinking the God I've imagined that's the one.
That's the one.
No perspective.
That's what church teaches you, though.
No. Let's see.
That's what religion teaches you.
No.
That their path is.
I'm not talking about the path.
Talking about individual experiences and how I might praise and how he might think he is praising, but it's very singular look at that. Then he sees other people praising in different ways.
And where you're right is Christianity does teach that like this is the only path to God, right? I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about is just what do I think God is? And then when I hear you tell me what you think God is, that modifies what I think God is, because I never thought about it like that, right? But if I don't have that, if I don't get that, right, then every time I pray, I'm praying to this cup, right? Because this is the wealth and the size of my imagination of God, right? It's kind of like for me, it's taking a cup out of the ocean, right? What you have is seawater,
right?
It's true.
But there's a whole bunch of myths.
Baby. There's some God and some depth that ain't in that cup.
And you know, I think there's grounding in church. I was telling you earlier that I walked around, I landed on Ebenezer Baptist. I hadn't planned to go to church. I just had planned to take a walk and take in the scenes. And then I was dressed in a sweatsuit, but didn't make a difference. I said, "Oh, I have on a sweat," and I said, "Oh, what am I talking about? I'm going to a black church.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to a black church here.
Absolutely.
That there's going to be grounding, there's going to be openness, no one's going to look at me funny, and I know that when I get in there, it's going to be the same rituals and home that I have back in New Jersey, and that's exactly what it was.
Absolutely.
I saw the same types of deacons, I saw the same types of the pastor and Pastor Warnock, and I saw, it was, it was a female preacher, and she was preaching about feminism, theology, and it was home. We all stood up and we clapped, and she teared up, and she told a story because she saw one of her teachers in the audience who was at that church, and it was all home.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love most about church.
And that ethos you cannot get by yourself at home.
Oh, no, you can't.
I mean, if you think of Sam Cooke, you think of Aretha Franklin, you think of Whitney Houston, you think of Luther Vandross, the list is going to go on and on and on. You get that sound because they were in the children's choir in church. You will not get that sound singing to your broom or to your brush at home. You have to come to the collective ritual for your voice to get shaped and molded in that, because it's a matrix. All of these things, right, are interacting spiritually, right, upon you and to you and with you and for you, and it produces a being. It produces a self that you're only going to get if you come to that space to get it. Now, what's true for me, most churches need to be completely overhauled. I would absolutely throw most of the theology out of most churches. I really even think we really need to use a new Bible, but that's another. All right, that's right. We'll leave that alone. Right, but I do believe this. But I think that even in terms of black families, because I think so many people have had their issues with the church was flawed. So many families have had their struggles, so that now lots and lots of people don't go to churches anymore.
Sure. Yeah.
And really, I'm voting for it not because of the theology, I'm voting for it because of the gathering power when black people come together. I cannot find another gathering space when black people in general come together. I can't find it. I'll trade church out for it if someone can find it for me. I can't find it. Where we do ritual.
And we honor.
Club don't count.
No, where we doing ritual.
What you say?
What is it?
Said the club.
Because the whole family's not invited to the club.
Right. And we honor the people.
Did we invite all the family
And
to the
we-
club? I'm done.
And we see the organizational structure too of a church,
Absolutely.
and we see ourselves in positions of power.
Absolutely.
So that someone
Yeah.
can have a day job that might, is completely different, and then they come in there and they're a trustee. It doesn't matter what they do in their day job. And that also is very powerful to see people in that position and run a church. You get the organizational structure that actually translates very well out in the real world because the church is a business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think historically, I'm voting to keep the black church because it's probably the one collective space we have owned where we don't have to be obsessed with the white gaze.
Right.
That's right.
It's the one place where white people are not watching us.
Church
We're,
in the
we're
barbershop.
unsurveilled for an hour.
Except white Jesus.
Right. Exactly. Which is why I'm saying I'm voting to absolutely throw that out. Because see, for me, we can still do the church and it doesn't have to be Christianity at all.
Can we add
'Cause I'm talking
rituals to the
ritual.
barbershop?
Right.
Oh, you mean the rituals of a barbershop, like going there and that's a space that's our own, that's kind of sacred that we own. And
It's rather ritualistic already.
but
the
it's
problem
not-
is that
I'm just trying to think of-
it's not. There are not women in it. Generally.
Right.
See, I'm
Like,
the
I'm just
space
trying to
where
think of-
all of us. See.
Yeah.
And really, when you get in that space too, your DNA kicks in. I mean,
Right.
the songs, the rhythm, the words, the power of somebody being in the pulpit, these days, man or woman, it does hit home. And I find that you may not like a church, someone may not like a particular church theology, but once you go in, whether you like it or not, you have your own independent relationship with the Lord. So you can just create whatever you want.
Right,
It doesn't have to look like
Right.
anybody else's.
Right.
You can take, and you probably will have to take bits and parts of the church, leave some, take some, whatever is of value to
Right.
you.
And I also want to explode the dichotomy between spirituality and going to church. Because when I look at my grandmother, she went to church every week. She was highly spiritual, right? People would call it religious because you go to the church every week. But the truth of the matter is, far too often, it's not always true, but far too often, what many people mean by I'm spiritual and not religious is I don't like the church.
Or
Right.
or I don't necessarily follow the tenets of organized religion.
But see, here's the question then. Then what do I follow? Because if it's spirituality, it's a system. It's a structure, which is perfectly fine.
But it's not a religious structure.
No problem. I'm just asking, what is it? And many people I just don't.
Does it
Many
have to be
people
a
are telling me what they
religious
don't
structure
do.
or a religious
Right.
belief.
I don't need to be anything. I just want you to tell me what it is. Because I'm just trying to figure out, what do you do? See, spirituality cannot be simply, I just don't do that.
Sure.
Right? Because a spirituality is a system by definition. Fine. If somebody says, I go out to the park, right? I go out to the park every Saturday morning and I sit and talk to God beneath a tree. Ashe. One, that's beautiful. Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I look at so for me, I look at meditation and prayer as the same thing.
I think that's
Like for me, meditation is my talk to the higher power, or as my daughter calls the beloved Creator. And because we have all of these different ways of trying to explain the same thing, right? Like so, if it's not the Christian Jesus Christ, or if it's not again that white God,
Right.
then it's not real.
right.
But it's I think kind of what you're saying, the belief in a higher power, and whatever that form of acknowledgement of that higher power, doesn't matter what you call it,
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you do it,
Right.
but that you have it.
Right.
So I think my not pushback, but when I make a differentiation between spirituality and religion, I'm pretty much talking the organized religious way of the connection to God that religion says you're supposed to have.
Sure. But see, I think a person who does spirituality, even the way you do it, which is beautiful, a person who meditates, right? The issue, the thing I think that's important for a person to be clear about then what I'm committed to is I'm committed to meeting God in this meditative space every Wednesday, whatever their regularity is, right? I'm looking for the discipline of the spirituality.
The ritual.
Right? Because if you don't have that, one doesn't have a spirituality, right? One has a belief. A spirituality is a discipline. You still got to meet God somewhere. I'm not doing it on the terms of Christianity. Magnificent. So you meeting God where and when? What's your discipline of it? Not yours, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
A spirituality is still supposed to be a discipline.
Which is how we started in terms of the discipline that you are
in
looking
order.
for,
Boundaries.
right? And the order,
Yeah.
and that is what the church gives
Absolutely.
you, and that's what you're giving your students.
Because if I'm going to study God in nature, you can't study God in nature if you miss every other week.
you should,
Nature shifted while you was gone.
you cannot.
See, the discipline means you got to be there right? Because then you'll see how, oh my God, that bird started building that nest yesterday. And it's a little more built today. And in a minute, part of the wonder and part of the magic of my spirituality will be, I watched that bird build that nest straw by straw. That's absolutely a spirituality. But if I come this Friday and I don't come until next week, it'll be chicks all in the nest. And
You've missed the whole
you've
process.
Absolutely. Spirituality is still process. It's still process.
One of my favorite emails that I get consistently from students is, Dear Professor Kelly, I missed class. Did I miss anything? He knows.
I'm done.
He
We're
knows. He
I'm done.
knows.
Ma'am, I cannot even, I have to go. I can't. First of all,
You've gotten it. You've gotten it.
ma'am, and this one I love, can you call me? Hell no. Calling
That's
you.
the discipline.
Absolutely, I'm not calling you.
That right. That's
Can
that.
you
that's,
call a peer who's in this class?
Yeah.
I'm not your personal tutor.
Yeah.
People, cut it out.
Cut.
Did I miss anything? Oh,
Cut it
there's
out.
some days when I do nothing.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. But that's the discipline, and you know that's all of the
Absolutely.
discipline that we are talking about. That really you get from that family structure, because when we look at statistics or even just empirical evidence with all of us, the most influential people in our lives are our parents or people who have acted as our parents or mentors in some way and made that up.
Sure.
And we see the result in the schools. Sometimes it's not going that well, but there's a lot of hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we know that it's our role to kind of to be the fixer, to be the smoother outer.
But it should start at home.
It's just
That's the takeaway.
That's the takeaway, right?
Yeah, it does.
And this is one of the reasons I love Jesus, because I think Jesus was a spiritually disciplined man, but I don't think Jesus was a Christian.
He wasn't.
No, right. We all know
Right.
right. But I think Jesus' spirituality was absolutely evident. And most people don't study Jesus for spirituality. Most people think you're studying Jesus for Christianity. But Christianity doesn't come until Jesus been dead.
Right. So people say you want to be Christ-like. You really want to be Jesus-like.
Right. You really do. And Jesus' spirituality, I mean, anybody who could talk to the wind and the wind obey, baby, that's spirituality.
Wow.
Now that is spirituality. That's spirituality to me.
Bam.
And on that note,
That's That's how we're in that right there.
But Jesus is disciplined spiritual. You know, there all throughout the Bible, he went and prayed at the Mount of Olives. They could not find him because he was in prayer at the Mount of Olives, right? Jesus was so unbelievably consistent, right, in seeking God. So unbelievably consistent that anything God had created, Jesus gets dominion over, because Jesus sought God to the point of probably God getting sick of Jesus. Right? So peace be still, right? And all the waters calm. Baby, that's spirituality. I love it. Not he read the Bible.
Yo.
Yeah.